So I decided to help out my sister. I told her I would pay for her rent if she just goes ahead and gets a job. I know she had a tough life growing up and, well, now she's a mother. So I'm trying my best to help her. But then she decides to backstab me and do one thing I told her not to do.
I've been the black sheep of the family my whole life. My parents, Darcy and Ken, always wanted a delicate little daughter who would be obedient and pretty and look good when they showed us up to the group of friends. So, was their first child, and I guess it started off as I was too young to have a personality, and so they could dress me up in pretty girl dresses, put bows in my hair, and just toddled along behind them to church and lunches with their friends, and they got all the compliments they needed over me. When my sister Stacy was born 3 years later, they had a couple of little princesses to dress up and show off. Until I got old enough to develop a personality and turn into a complete tomboy. Well, when I was a child and still now as an adult, I just hated pretty dresses and activities that were considered by my parents to be appropriate for a girl. They enrolled my sister and me into dance classes, piano lessons, and girl groups, and I hated all of it. I was a terrible dancer. I have no musical talent, and all I wanted was to join in with the boys' groups and go swimming, boating, and messing around in the woods. All of which I was not allowed to do. My sister, on the other hand, was brilliant at all those things, and I hated her for it. In hindsight, it was not her fault that she was seen as the better daughter, and it was my parents who were trying to enforce gender roles on their children, but when you're a child, you don't see it that way. All I saw was that Stacy was always getting praised, and I was always in trouble. If my parents have allowed me to take up hobbies more suited to the person I was, we would have had a much better relationship. As it is, we barely see each other. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate my parents, but I will never understand their obsession with wanting girls to be tied to specific hobbies. Their obsession went over to what we could read and what films we could watch. As I grew up and went to high school, I found a group of friends who were like me, both the boys and girls, and I just felt a lot happier than I ever had. I was able to do sports more suitable to my interest, read books that my friends shared with me, and watch movies that they liked. My parents hated that they were always telling me I would never find a good husband, which I never really bothered about as marriage was not something I was in a hurry to do. Finally, I went off to university and loved the city where I attended school, and so when I have finished my degree, I chose to stay there and find a nice job. It's across the country from my parents and sister, so I only see them a couple times a year, although I speak to them regularly, so they can update me on how amazing my sister is. All that changed 3 months ago when I got a phone call from my sister. She was sobbing, and it took me ages to work out what the problem actually was. I've never seen my sister upset like that ever. She was distraught, and she said that my parents were kicking her out of the house. She had nowhere to go. She asked if she could come and stay with me, and that's when I knew that she must be in trouble, as although we tolerate each other, I'm the last person she would ever want to live with. When I finally got her to calm down, I found out what had gone wrong. My little sister, the apple of my parents' eyes, was pregnant. Well, without being married. That was a sin in their eyes, and they would be horrified about whether their God-fearing friends would think if they found out their daughter they claimed to be so perfect was in fact a normal human being, with normal human flaws. Stacy told me she had met a boy who told her that he loved her. She believed him, and she also believed him when he told her that if you were going to marry someone, it was normal to have physical relations, so you knew you were a, quote, good fit. Of course, she went along with him and ended up pregnant, and that's when he did a little runner and left her there to face the consequences by herself. One of the problems with our parents is that they never set us up to know how normal relationships work. or how you should trust everything a man tells you and how you should not. I learned all that through my friends and their parents, but Stacy was very naive and gullible for her age. Of course, she immediately told our parents, expecting that they would help her out with the problem as they always did. But they were horrified and told her she's on her own on this one and had to get out of the house ASAP she let the family down. Stacy did not know what to do, and so she called me. I wasn't all surprised at our parents' reaction, and although my relationship with my sister was at best frosty, I could not allow her to be homeless and pregnant, so I bought her an air ticket, and I told her to get on the next plane and we would work something out. At that moment, I was worried about her, as she would have no idea how to bring up a child. Not that I had any experience either, but I at least had good friends and a sensible head on my shoulders. So, my sister arrived at my house with just a small backpack of clothing, which was all my parents had allowed her to grab, before she was basically physically thrown out of the house. I was angry as to who the heck throws a pregnant girl from the home. Stacy was only 20 when this happened 3 years ago, but on a maturity level, I would say she's like a teenager. Her plane did not get in until late, so we went straight to my house and I got her settled in and called my parents to tell them exactly what I thought about their parenting. They didn't seem to think that they've done anything wrong, and so I told them I was done with them, and I would make sure that Stacy was okay. In the morning, I had a good look at things, and Stacy had, and we just made a list of things that we would need the most when I went shopping just to get her some basic necessities. Clothes, cosmetics, Stacy seemed different, but it was not until later that I realized that it was not a good thing. Anyways, that's getting ahead of myself. Stacy settled in, and I helped her to get registered with a doctor and a midwife, and I introduced her to my friends who were very kind when I told them exactly what happened with her. They said that they would be there with me to help her. We also sat her down and said that she had options. She did not have the baby if she did not want to have it, as it was no shame to admit you were not ready to do something about it. Or at least she could have done it if she realized she was pregnant sooner. I'm not sure if she didn't know and had been scared to admit herself that she was pregnant, or if she was just too naive to think that she was. My parents once told us when we were children that you could only have a baby when you were married, and so since Stacy was not married, she actually believed she would not get pregnant, which also explained the lack of contraception. My friends were stunned when I told them it, and I told them a lot of stories about my life growing up over the days following Stacy's arrival, and they could not understand why any parents would treat their kids this way. I was technically single at the time, but there was a guy who I was very close to. Well, I was hoping that we would be together. Neither of us were in a rush, but we would spend a lot of time together, and we were getting closer to being official. His name's Dan, and he's wonderful. He's been really supportive of me through this whole saga, and I just met him rock climbing, which is a hobby that I love. And we work close to each other, so we started just meeting for lunch, and then it went from there. It was Dan who first gently approached the issue that I'm here to ask for advice about. As I mentioned, we've broached the idea of getting rid of the pregnancy, and although Stacy was not sure she agreed, we would ask the doctor about options. She had never seen a doctor so far, and so when they did a scan, it was a shock to us all when we found out Stacy was actually 4 months pregnant. So, termination was not an option. The doctor mentioned that as she had not done much about her pregnancy, and she should look at herself and keep better care of herself, and just be careful, and that's where the problem started. Stacy would not do anything during her whole pregnancy. I was almost like a maid in my own home. I'd said from the start that Stacy did not need to worry about rent or a job while she was pregnant, as I was in a comfortable position and could afford to help her. But it would not be for any luxuries. Just the basics she needed until the baby was born, and then she would need to think about getting a job once the baby was old enough to be left. We looked into financial help so she could have that, and it would also help her as she could not get work while she was pregnant. She was able to have a bit of money from the state. It did cover some of her baby requirements and basic needs, but it was not very much, and I made sure that there was a good food available, so Stacy gave birth to her daughter Kara, and she was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. None of this is the problem I'm having. The problem is that, well, you'll probably notice, Kara, by the way, is now 3 years old, and Stacy's still living with me rent-free. I gave her some space to get used to the motherhood and then began to suggest that she looks for work, and she'd be happier in her own place with her daughter. In the 3 years since Kara was born, Stacy had not had a job. She had relied on the state and on occasion on boyfriends she's dated for a few months until the money dries up. Dan has raised the issue that I'm letting her walk all over me and it needs to stop. A few days ago, my friend who works in a local business said that there were jobs available, and they could get Stacy one of them. It's good money, and the hours would work really well with the opening times for the nursery. Stacy would be able to put Kara into a nursery when she's at work and also save up at her own place. I put all this into Stacy, and she said that she would not take it if she had to pay for childcare. And as I was the one wanting to, quote, push her back to work, I should be the one to pay for the childcare. I've let my sister live in my house rent-free for nearly 4 years. She's never contributed to a thing. Is it unreasonable for me to tell her that I will not be paying for her child to go into childcare while she gets a job? Dan thinks I've done enough and Stacy is using me. I just don't know what to do. I love my niece, so I don't want her to suffer any. What would you do in this position? I'm so torn right now. What is up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So today's story is a very interesting one. Can you imagine the entitlement from the sister? Gosh. Drop a comment down below, let me know exactly how you would handle this. Guys, there is multiple updates. We're looking at about 3. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe for daily videos, and let's jump into update number 1. The general opinion seems to be that I've brought all this upon myself, and I guess to a certain extent I probably have. There were a lot of questions about things which I'll try to answer and more details about other stuff, so yeah. This all started over 3 years ago. Sorry if anyone did not realize that. Stacy is now 23 old, and I'm 26, and Kara is 3. Dan and I got together officially just after Kara was born, and have been together ever since. We discussed moving in together, but with Stacy living with me, it just did not seem possible. This is one of the reasons I'm pushing Stacy to become more independent and find her own job, her own friends, in her own place. We've not seen or spoken to my parents since Stacy first arrived with me, as they have disowned Stacy for having a child when she was not married, and I'm absolutely furious with them. I wrote the first part of this a couple months ago. I was just so frustrated as I could not get Stacy to accept that she needs to build her own life and stop relying on me. I can't afford to keep supporting her. As Kara's getting older and needs more and more things, I always seem to have to buy. Well, this is another issue. She's not at all interested in being a mother. When I'm at work, Stacy sits on her backside, watches television, or even plays on her phone, while Kara's left to play in her room or living room. I made Kara's lunch before I go to work, and I leave it in the fridge. So, all Stacy has to do is give it to her at lunchtime, and many times I've come home and Kara's hungry and in a dirty nappy. Well, as Stacy forgot to deal with it. She's made no effort to get Kara out of nappies either. Anyways, Stacy and I had a huge argument about everything, and finally I told her that if she did not go and see my friend about a job, I was kicking her out because I was done with being her maid service. I'm not sure I would have gone through with it, as I would not have seen Kara living in a shelter or on the street. Stacy, surprisingly, went to see my friend, and when she came back, she was actually more positive, as she had seen that there were a lot of people working there who were her age and she could have a social life at work. I agreed that I would pay for childcare for 2 months so that she could get herself sorted with her wages and make sure she had some money behind her, and then she could go ahead and take over the payments. I'd seen a really good nursery that was close to where I work, so I would also be able to pick Kara up if Stacy had a later shift. All in all, Stacy seemed happy with this, and I was finally feeling that there was hope that she would become a better mother to her daughter, and even realized that she did not need to be at my house living off of me. I was feeling so positive, and there was a little part of me that felt selfish, as I was wanting my home back as Dan could move in, and we could just think about marriage and a family of our own. Things have been going well for Stacy, and I think that the argument we had made her just open her eyes to know how she had been taking advantage of me for years. She has been at her new job for around 6 weeks now, and she seems like a different person. She's more confident, she has money of her own, and she has even treated me to a meal just to say thank you. The best part is that she's making friends her own age, and this seems to have a really good of building up her self-confidence. She's talking to them on the phone, having lunch together when she's at work, and she's even decided to go full-time hours to earn more money so she can look for her own place soon. I'm so happy that she's finally accepting and that she just needs to be responsible for herself and her daughter. It's been a long time coming, and I'm just feeling that things are going to keep moving in the right direction from now on. So, thank you everybody for your comments, advice. Thankfully, things sorted themselves out, so I didn't need anything drastic, but I do appreciate all the support. Update number 2. I came back to read over my last 2 posts just to see where the heck I've gone wrong, and now reading the update following my first post, I feel like I could slap myself around the head for being so positive and optimistic about the future. I've spent so much time saying that Stacy is naive for her age, right? And now I think I'm actually the gullible idiot. It's been a while since I've wrote anything, so here's a quick overview of where I'm at. Stacy has successfully kept the job with my friend's business, which is great. She's been saving up money to get her own place. And she's a lot more outgoing and positive. Unfortunately, these are not the good things that would expect, because she's gone too far in making a new life for herself, and her daughter is not being made part of it. I'm not sure when the worst of the behavior began, but we're now at a point where I'm faced with having to do something very drastic. I would say I'm here for advice again, but in my heart, I know what I need to do. And I'm just putting this into words to help myself think it through. You see, there's something therapeutic about ranting to strangers online. Dan's even behind me 100%, and it may go wrong, but I have to try. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Stacy loves her job, she loves her friends, and she loves the freedom earning money's giving her. The problem is that she loves it more than she loves her daughter, whom I'm not sure she loves at all. Kara comes very low on my sister's priority list. I mean, it started small. I got a call from Stacy saying that she had been asked to go for drinks with her new friends after work, and if I'd be able to pick up Kara from nursery and babysit her until she got back. Well, I was happy at the time that she was making friends, and so I agreed, as I love spending time with Kara. She's funny and a clever little girl. I picked up Kara and took her home. Dan came around and we ordered pizza and just had a great night. Stacy has said she would be back in time to put Kara to bed, but she wasn't, so I put Kara to bed. Well, it made me sad to see that even at age 3, Kara seemed to be accepting her mother not keeping her promise ever. Stacy finally arrived home at 1 a.m. and guys, she was extremely drunk. I had to put her to bed just like I put her daughter to bed just a few hours earlier. In the morning, we had a talk, and Stacy said she had lost track of time and she said she was sorry. It would simply not happen again, however, it did happen again. And again, and again. It happened over and over until sometimes she did not come home at all and she would stay with her, quote, friends. And I would get an apologetic text in the morning saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry." This went on for a while, and I told her over and over that it was not fair on me. But more importantly, it was simply not fair to Kara, who needed her mother to come home so she could deal with her. At this point, Stacy lost her temper and said that she had not a chance to have a life with being a mother so young and she was allowed to have a good time now. I said that it was her own fault that she's not been able to party when she was younger, and it was not Kara's fault that she had been born. That's when Stacy said something that made my blood absolutely run cold. She said that she wished she had not, had a baby at all, and that Kara would never have ruined her life. I admit I did not handle it well and snapped back at her that Stacy had ruined her own darn life when she slept with a man who was using her, had not thought about her options sooner, and had been too stupid to use contraception. We had not an argument that bad since the time I was angry she would not get a job. Now, this is the worst part. Kara heard, and one night when Stacy had yet again failed to come home, I was reading Kara a story before bed, and she asked me why her mother did not love her like the mommy in the book loved their little girl. My heart broke, and I panicked and said that of course her mother loved her. But at that moment, she had just, had a lot of work to do, so I was helping to look after Kara. I tucked Kara into bed, and she said very quietly that she wished I was her mommy. I gave her a really quick kiss goodnight and left the room before she could go ahead and see that I was crying. Dan was in the living room and saw that I was upset and simply asked me what is wrong. So I tell him what Kara had said, and he said that Kara had a point really, as I was more of a mother to her than Stacy was. Even when Stacy was here all the time before she got a job, she was never a good mother. She would get so angry with Kara and push her away any time that Kara tried to go on her knee for a hug, and she just barely ever looked after her. I was the one who made sure that lunch was made for Kara every single day. I usually gave her a bath in the evening as Stacy could not be bothered, and I was the one who read Kara a bedtime story. I had not realized how much of the mommy role I actually had done. I just did it because I loved Kara with all my heart. Maybe that's when the idea began to go into my mind that I did not want Kara to leave me. Stacy's behavior was getting worse, and what would happen to Kara if Stacy was in her own home and having to care for a child she did not actually want or love? I needed to work out a way to protect Kara, and that's where I'm at now. My plan is to make sure that Stacy loses custody of Kara, and I will step in to be her mother. Just to say all the names, they're changed, as I don't want Stacy or my parents to see this post. And to be honest, Stacy would not be reading anything this long anyways. She's so oblivious, she would not know what it was even about. I'll probably get some abuse over this, but my sister does not deserve a beautiful child like Kara. And if I let her take her away, Kara will have a life that could harm her. I'm not a spiteful person, and I will not apologize for what I'm about to do. I've fed up with my family ruining the lives of their children, and Kara will not be another victim. Tomorrow, I have an appointment with a lawyer, and I'll start my custody application. It might not work, I know it's a risk, but Stacy is not safe to be a mother. In the last week, she has been home 2 nights, and on both of those nights, she ignored Kara. It's the only option I have to protect her. Update number 3. Wow, this has been a rough ride, but it's over. I was not going to write another update after the last one, and, well, I got a lot of abuse and a lot of people in the comments were saying that I was a bad guy in this situation, and hey, maybe they're right. I don't know. But I've made up my mind, and I was about to start fighting. I'd lost along the way, and some of my friends who were also friends with Stacy, and she liked to party with them, and just gave me a lot of abuse as soon as I officially started the legal proceedings. Well, they're no longer my friends. I think no matter whether I won or lost, they would not have forgiven me. Dan and my true friends, they supported me fully and helped me to gather evidence and provide statements of support, and that was amazing. My parents even tried to get in on things when Stacy called them to tell them what I was doing. They had the absolute audacity to say Stacy was a good parent, even though they've never met Kara or seen Stacy since they kicked her out. Their opinion of me did not matter at all. My lawyer told me that I had to be realistic and that my chances are very low as the court would not easily give custody to an aunt over a child's mother. Without a lot of proof, it was in the best interest. I explained the whole situation and he said he actually agreed with me. But how the judge would see things was anybody's guess. I said that I was prepared for that and maybe this would give Stacy a kick up the behind to be a better parent. Well, I was worried if I lost that Stacy would forbid me from seeing Kara ever again, but I just had to take the risk. My lawyer told me it would be expensive, and I said that I had savings so I would pay whatever it took. Dan also came and said he would help as Kara deserved better. We did not immediately launch the proceedings as we needed evidence so Stacy would not just do a runner with Kara. My lawyer even hired a private detective, which felt a bit shady really. He followed Stacy for weeks before we launched our case. He was expensive, but he was damn good. By the time the case was ready, he had photos, recordings, and just so much evidence that I began to be much more confident. Some of it was so bad that my lawyer said we should get to child services involved ASAP, which we did. They were really the ones who turned the case around as they launched an investigation and it was noticed that Stacy was never at home. I was Kara's main go-to caretaker. And the time they did manage to catch up with Stacy, she was at home in charge of Kara and had drinking with her friends at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. After that visit, I was given temporary protective order to care for Kara until the court case. I was worried that Kara would be upset as Stacy was ordered to move out of my house away from Kara, and she did, with no protest at all, and into the house of a man she's currently dating. Kara was to stay with me until the court case, and then it would be decided what happened. Child Services asked me if I wanted Kara to stay with me, and I said yes. They explained that I would need to be checked out and all that, but hey, I passed everything with flying colors. I asked for Dan to also be investigated as he would be in Kara's life. He also passed with flying colors. Well, we expected Stacy to fight us in court, just because she likes a fight, but that's not what happened. On the morning of the court appointment, she didn't even show. Her lawyer tried to find her, but she was nowhere to be found. The house she was staying at was empty, and no one knew where she was. My sister had finally just totally abandoned her daughter, and we had to explain that to a 3-year-old. Kara is very mature for her age, and she cried for a while, but when we explained she'd be living with me and Dan, she was happy about it. The court put the orders in place, and I am in the process of formally adopting Kara. In the months since the court hearing, we have not heard a peep from Stacy, and there are protective orders in place to prevent her from seeing Kara. To be safe just in case she decides to try to take Kara though, Dan and I have both transferred our jobs to another city. A long ways away from where we live now. And she'll not be able to find us. I don't think she'll even try. Once I say I'll have to explain all this to Kara when she's a bit older, just to understand, but Dan and I will love her as our daughter, and that will never change.
I'm just so glad this story ended with OP getting full custody of her niece. I mean, guys, could you even imagine being in OP's position and just having to look after this poor little girl who only wants her mother to be around? Well, OP was that person who could fill that void, and I'm just glad the story ended this way. Guys, if you were in this position, I would like to know, what would you do? Drop your comments down below, let's discuss it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.